Welcome to another weekend here on the platform. My name is Sam Omashe. My column, Okada, oh Okada, will be read to you shortly.
Okada, oh Okada. A personal encounter. I drove to an elderly person's residence around Ogba in Lagos State and parked across the street. I peered through my rearview mirror into a crescent street. No car whirring towards me, no Okada blaring. It was safe to open the door and step out. No, it wasn't. The door ajar, and before my left shoulder moved, my car vibrated. The driver's door creaked and snapped at the hinges. I stiffened with knowledge. A contraption had jumped over from the car door, a motorcycle flying one way and two humans the other. It was a nightmare at noon, a humorless movie unfurling before me. My eyes devoured the scene without understanding it. Gradually, as though a mist was clearing, I recognized the woman, a passenger, unable to rise from the ground. Between her chest and waist was a threat to my sense of peace. She looked pregnant. I hoped it was a biological disorder, a potbelly of sorts, a protuberance from an earlier birth. I saw her before I heard her. "What did I do to you?" she mumbled, tears coursing down her face. "Did they send you to me? I don't know you. Do you want to kill him?" Her hand pointing to her stomach area, and I knew she was pregnant and accusing me of wizardry at the same time. She was injured and bleeding. The Okada rider was also on the ground, his feet also bleeding. In a few minutes, the rearview mirror's silent street had buzzed into a cacophony of Okadas, and they surrounded me and my host who had seen the chaos. The two victims were taken in my car to a hospital. I was thankful that no one died, but the two suffered severe injuries. I picked up the bills. I became a hostage of the Okada riders, who thought this haughty, cold-blooded big man might maneuver and escape and entrap the victims with the hospital costs. I did not only pay the bills for the day, I ended up monitoring and footing the bills of the pregnant woman until she was delivered of her baby. In all, my gratitude was that a rugged act of commerce did not frog-march me to the court for manslaughter, especially charged with a fetal fatality. You can imagine the superstitious malignity of a stranger sent from the village by wicked in-laws to waylay an innocent woman in the city. While many may gripe that the restriction on Okadas may be anti-poor, they should realize that most of the victims of Okada have been the poor. Okada itself was an accident. No one plotted for it. We could argue that a few factors brought it here. 1. Infrastructure deficit. 2. Fewer buses. 3. A teeming population. All of these point to a poor policy, especially during the military. Okadas are a military legacy, one of the scars from the era. But the issue is clear. These motorcycles do not belong to mass transit in a megacity. They are not part of a modern world. It is a backward policy to have them in an age where mass transit and highways define the nerve centers. The BOS of Lagos, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, decided that it was not to cover the whole city, but the major arteries have to be protected from the menace. It is easy to blame it as a dig at the poor. The rich and car owners have had to use it too, especially when enmeshed in go slow. Some use it when trying to catch their flights. Such moments will haunt car owners too. But we're either a modern city or a surrender to the past. Accepting Okadas and Keke Napeps is a caving into underdevelopment. It subverts a rite of progress to the future. It is what former US President George W. Bush calls the soft bigotry of low expectation. Okada does not belong to the future. As a sportswear says, the future is coming. Go forth. In modern societies, the motorcycle is for dispatch services, and at that, often well organized. The other use is for recreation, the Harley-Davidson culture. But here, it is about naira and debts. The governor has rolled out buses, and more are coming. Work is on with infrastructure. It is one thing for the people to move in a city. It is quite more important to be safe while doing it. Okada is not like the autobiographical fiction titled Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance by Robert Persig, in which a ride is not rough and tumble, but a tranquil rumination on life. You cannot focus on peace in an Okada the way you can in a bus.
Joining me today on the Big Talk is Dr. Ebinya Ugbeye, a medical consultant, or I would say a retired orthopedic surgeon. That's more proper, right? Yeah. At the National Orthopedic Hospital, Igbobi. Welcome to this show.
Thank you for inviting me.
And I must add too that Dr. Ugbeye was my senior at Government College, Ughelli. Was also my senior at Ole House, the same house and same house in which we were in Ughelli. And welcome to this show.
Thank you.
Now, what would you say is the basic thing we must know about our bones, especially for those of us who move from one place to get to the other, either in cars or in okadas? What are some of the basic things we must know about our bones?
Well, first thing, bone is one of the organs in the body that God provided for support. And it's one of the organs, it's the only organ in the body that forms itself when it is broken. So that's a natural gift God gave man.
Yeah.
It's the only tissue in the body that forms itself.
When you mean that it forms itself?
That is, for instance, if you were to have a wound on your skin, when it heals, it will heal with a scar.
Okay.
But when you break your bone, it heals by forming bone.
Okay.
So that is a natural process that even everybody takes advantage of.
So when the bone heals itself,
yes,
it doesn't leave a scar,
no,
or even a sign that it had broken before.
Where it may, I mean, it depends on at the age it occurred.
Okay.
So if it was for be a child, over the years you may not see anything, but for an adult, when you do an X-ray, you may see evidence of the fact that there was a fracture before. Okay. But the main thing I'm trying to pass across is that a man who has fractured, for instance, you see a madman on the street that has had a fracture, you see him lying in one position for maybe 2 or 3 months, maybe he's broken the leg. Yeah. And then after about 3 months, you see him get up and walk. Yeah. Because at that point, the bone is touching, but the natural process heals itself. So without you doing anything. So that is the beauty of a fracture healing. And that's the advantage of what the traditional bone setters say. They've done something wonderful.
Miraculous.
Yes. So,
that reminds me of a story my dad told me in those days about somebody who broke the bone. And he said, well, I saw this person and then they were trying to heal the person and they had to break the bone of a cock.
Yes.
And they said that as the cock healed, so the human being healed, as if there was some kind of magical thing working in between.
No. I think it's just a myth to also exactly, and for you to pay. They create that myth there. But you see, the thing is that for humans, the bone once he's broken and the edges are touching, as long as nothing disturbs it, it will heal naturally. So that process, what the medical doctor does is to align it in a way that is acceptable, as close as to what God had created before.
Okay.
That's just the difference. Though there are some bones, because of the natural fluid in the body that bats around the edges, no matter what you do, it wouldn't heal until you intervene. That's what the surgeon does.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Now, there are stories about, so many stories about broken bones and some near tragedies that happen when people are involved in accidents, especially automobile and so-called okada accidents and so on. What will you give us anecdotally what you have experienced, especially at the orthopedic hospital? Gbobi is like the signpost for orthopedic story in Nigeria.
Yes, that's
so
true.
what you have seen in those places, especially with regard to accidents that happen in Lagos.
Yeah, well, Igbobi is it's a trauma center, and it's a referral center for trauma patients, and actually covers a lot of areas. Apart from trauma, you have also other aspects of surgery, plastic surgery, bones and plastic. You have other aspects of medicine that is available. But let's go straight to the Okada injuries. And I've done a lot of work with Okada. In fact, my dissertation in my final fellowship exam was on Okada accidents.
That was many years ago.
Yeah, somehow. That's it.
That was before Okada became what it is today.
So the mechanism of injury is very interesting. You have the front, or called the front direct trauma, direct collision. You have the rear end collision. You have the broadside all in which the car hits the
side
cycle,
of the ball.
Yeah, and then you have the side swipe.
Okay.
That comes either from the front or from the back. And then, but in all these mechanisms, the commonest injuries are to the extremities, the lower extremities.
Yeah. When you use the word extremities, so others can understand.
The legs.
The
commonest injuries are to the legs.
Yes.
And then you find that because the rider is able to, is the one with the control, is able to most time maneuver his way from the direct trauma coming. And from my statistics, I found that head injuries were not very common, but when it occurred, most of them died. So well, our roads are not also very good, and so, but in the last 2 years, there was an initial ban when Fashola, yes. Then I think the whole thing, full force, they came back again.
Yes.
And the law, in fact, in the last 6 months, the statistics at Igbobi show that there were maybe 100 road traffic accidents presenting every month. 60 to 70% of them were Okada or motorcycle accidents.
No, you mean
from July?
Hundreds.
In every 100, 60.
In every 100,
60.
60 were from
motorcycle accidents. Before this new ban.
So when Fashola left and you had the Ambode administration,
yes.
During the Fashola time, evangelized against it and so on, it dropped.
Yes.
And then in the intervening years before this ban,
came up again.
It came out about then it shot up that every 100, 60.
That's at Igbobi presenting. Every 100 road traffic accidents that presented.
Yes.
The statistics from July last year, 2019, to December, 60%. Or that's 60. There were about 60. Were motorcycle accidents.
What were the nature of these accidents?
Most, like I said, fractures to the legs, fractures to the upper limbs, and a few head injuries. That's patients who were unconscious, sustained in different grades. But in my study previously to, prior to this time we're talking, that every passenger or rider that sustained a head injury as a result of a collision on a motorcycle that had a head injury died. Though it wasn't the commonest injury sustained. The commonest injuries sustained were injuries and there were fractures in the extremity, in the lower leg, in the legs. Though you also had soft tissue, that's abrasions here and there, you know, but fractures were the commonest injuries sustained.
Do you have some anecdotes, some stories? You don't need to mention the names. You can tell us like examples that.
I tell you one story that happened. I witnessed. It was on this K2 area.
Yeah.
There was a vehicle that was going, and the tire pulled off
From the vehicle.
from the vehicle, and jumped this curb on the express to the other side. And there I was looking, just close to this Owando petrol station along this K2 Alakwere, and the tire rolled to hit a man on a motorcycle on the other side of the express.
Wow.
And the man, fell because he was on a high speed and, hit his head on the ground.
Wow.
But people rushed around, poured water on him, but that was the funniest I ever saw. But luckily the man, survived. But the funny aspect is that most of these riders who came with injuries to the hospital, they never had money. And you hardly find relatives of them. So it was very funny. Who are the Okada riders?
Yeah.
Is it really the poor that are the riders or those who have? Because apart from that, we also notice a lot of foreigners who ride these motorcycles. They never had money for treatment. If they were from the north, for instance, most of them, before you know it, after your initial resuscitation that's keeping them alive, somebody comes to sign and takes them away.
With the wound,
with the wound, whatever. They say where they want to take them back home for better treatment. That's what happens.
What kind of treatment were they going to get?
Well, traditional bone setters, most likely. Another thing that's very common that I should mention is that sometimes some people discharge themselves out with fractures, and then they come back later with gangrene.
Please, that's not what gangrene is.
Yeah, gangrene is when the affected leg or their limb goes becomes there's no blood supply and is dead.
These people come to the hospital. Who are they? Did you in any way identify where they came from?
Yeah. There were a lot of foreigners from Niger Republic, apart from also people from the southeast and Akwa Ibom and Cross River State.
Okay.
But for amongst the foreigners, what I find is that they have a lot of brothers who are here working as megats or something. And when they come in, the easiest thing for them to do is to ride a motorcycle. But most of these motorcycles are not registered. There's no period of learning apart from maybe the short one the brother will show him. So the first ride out with a passenger actually be the first accident. So that's very interesting. And then you find the interesting thing also, like I said, the rider he can maneuver the motorcycle away from the trauma, so the passenger suffers most.
So what is the percentage of the if you have that of passenger accidents apart from the rider accident?
For lone riders, very few, unless for as a result of maybe drunkenness. For lone riders, though there's a lot of substance abuse amongst apart from even motorcycle riders, you have a lot of substance abuse amongst most drivers who fly long distances and all that. But within the Okada riders, what you find is that the passengers, in terms of injury they sustain, if it's a side swipe, like I said, or the broadside, or the injury sustained may just be because there the rider may not necessarily be aware what's going on. But for the front trauma, front or the
Attack,
attack, you find that they are able to maneuver. So most times you find that I would say 80% of injuries passengers sustain, more 80% of them,
passengers.
Yeah. Then you find that for those pedestrians, it's very minimal.
Okay, those on the roadside.
Yes. And then you have a few head-on collision amongst motorcycles.
Okay.
Where they are struggling.
Yes. They collide against
each other.
Yes.
Where they're struggling for
space.
For space and right of way. Sometimes they collide. Yeah.
So these passengers, do they stay long? What is the average period of stay in the hospital?
Yeah, for the leg fractures, if it was just a few abrasions, you get treated, and just seek antibiotics and all that, you are discharged home. For fractures, depending on the grade, for most leg fractures are open fractures. There's a combination between the fracture site and the environment. So that is a major trauma to whoever has sustained such an injury, because the potential to develop an infection is very high. So for a patient like that, has to go to theater to clean up the wound. If you can close, you close, and then you give antibiotics. And then if you can cast, then you observe for 24 hours and go home. But for the higher grades of open fractures, you may need to admit, because sometimes we need to put in what they call external fixators to hold the fractures in position. And then to create an environment for you to nurse the wound. Once the wound has healed, you may cast, or you may decide to, when you think there's no infection, you may decide to fix the bone with different methods. And then, so largely you find that for those who are in hospital for fracture fixation, they might spend a period of 2 to 3 weeks in hospital. Though, if you have multiple injuries, sometimes you find that patients stay longer, even sometimes up to a month or 6 weeks.
Okay. Yes, but I need to ask this question. Given the pressure that you've had, with so many people coming, for treatments and so on and so forth, the personnel, I'm talking of the medical personnel, are they under pressure? Are they under strain? Because there's a lot of work.
Yeah, well, these are professionals, and it's a teamwork. So you have your own fair share of what to do. And you always have backup where you have, for instance, mass casualty. But in the normal day-to-day work, there are enough personnel to handle situations. Because it's well organized.
Yes. Thank you. We had on this show Dr. Ebiyan Ugbeye, the retired orthopedic surgeon.
But not tired.
No, not tired. Because I know when I called you before you came, you said you were in the theater operating. Yes. Thank you very much for being on this show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, just before the program ends, this is my poem in honor of Leah Sharibu. Whenever a minor is raped, I remember your age. No one is kidnapped and I can't recall Dapchi. When they raid a place, all I hear and see is plague. Just as you see an ache. We can't see you, but in every loss and every pain, we see you, Leah, in our face. Thank you for watching the program today. You can catch up with my published column on www.samomashaye.com. Also follow me on Twitter. My handle is @SamOmashaye. Until next time, be good.